3 boys vanished in 2003. No footprints, no sounds, just a tent zipped from the inside, and a symbol carved into a tree. 20 years later, the forest gave back a piece of the truth, and it was darker than anyone imagined. Into cinematic true crime, whether it's haunting fiction or real-life disappearances, finally cracked. Subscribe now and tap the bell. Missing Shadows brings the darkest mysteries to light. Granite Creek Camp, July 2003. The summer wind whispered through the towering pines of Salmon Challis National Forest. Granite Creek flowed gently just beyond the clearing, its cold waters glistening under the sun. It was the second night of camp, and while most kids were still gathered around the campfire, 3 boys had already zipped themselves inside their shared tent, tired after a long day of hiking. Ethan Miller sat cross-legged with a sketchbook, drawing something he couldn't explain, shapes, eyes, and symbols that came to him in fragments. Lucas Carter, full of restless energy, was carving their initials into a piece of driftwood. Noah Reyes lay on his back, eyes fixed on the tent ceiling, humming softly. "Did you hear that?" Noah whispered suddenly. Ethan stopped sketching. Lucas sat up. "It's probably just the wind." But they all heard it. A faint rustle, too deliberate, too close. Noah unzipped the flap just a little. Beyond the trees, nothing but darkness and the dim flicker of the fire still burning at camp. They zipped the tent from the inside again. That was the last time anyone saw them. By sunrise, their tent was still there, perfectly in place, zipped shut. Their shoes were still at the entrance. The fire was nothing but dying embers, and there were no footprints. None. The camp leader, Don Keller, searched frantically. Within hours, authorities were called in. Search dogs, helicopters, hundreds of volunteers. Nothing. The only trace left behind was a strange carving in the bark of a pine tree just 30 feet from the tent. A spiral surrounded by crude, childlike drawings of 3 figures. It didn't make sense. The boys had vanished without a sound. No struggle, no blood, no goodbye. After weeks of searching, the trail went cold, and the forest kept its silence for 20 years. The news broke within hours. 3 boys missing from Idaho Wilderness Camp. TV channels ran old-school photos of Ethan, Lucas, and Noah, smiling faces frozen in time. The nation watched as helicopters combed the forest. Hundreds of volunteers lined up to help. Even strangers wrote letters, hoping, praying, believing. The FBI took over within 48 hours. Agent Martin Decker led the task force. For weeks, they searched tirelessly. Dogs trained to detect human scent swept every corner of Granite Creek. Divers searched the water. Infrared cameras scanned the forest at night. Nothing. The tent was untouched. No signs of forced entry. No tire tracks. No signs of animal attack. It was as if the boys had simply dissolved into the air. The carving on the pine tree became the center of attention. It was crude, a spiral inside a triangle, with 3 figures drawn underneath. At first, authorities dismissed it as childish nonsense. But when handwriting experts studied it, they claimed it didn't match any of the boys' normal writing or drawing styles. Still, it wasn't enough. Agent Decker held a press conference 3 weeks later. His voice was flat. "Despite exhaustive efforts, we have found no evidence indicating foul play, abduction, or natural danger. The investigation remains open, but we are suspending active search operations as of August 14, 2003. That announcement broke the parents. Ethan's mother, Karen Miller, collapsed during the press conference. Noah's father, Miguel Reyes, screamed at the cameras. "They were here. They were right here. You gave up too soon." Lucas's older brother, Jake Carter, only said one thing to reporters: "Someone out there knows something, and I'll find them." Years passed. The forest grew quiet again. Camp Granite Creek shut down. Families tried to rebuild, but the absence of closure haunted every single one of them. By 2005, the boys' case had become what the FBI called a silent file. No new leads, no new tips, no bodies, just the empty tent, the strange carving, and the sound of the wind in the trees. But the families, they never stopped searching. Every July, on the anniversary, the parents returned to Granite Creek. They left flowers, drawings, letters, anything to feel close to their sons again. And for 20 years, that forest remained still, until the summer of 2023. July 12, 2023, 7:46 a.m. The sky was still gray when Mason Fry, a 32-year-old nature photographer from Boise, zipped up his tent near an abandoned trailhead just 2 miles west of the old Granite Creek camp. He wasn't looking for trouble, only solitude. He'd grown tired of city life and planned to spend the week capturing untouched wilderness. But the trail he followed that morning led him deep into a part of the forest few dared to enter. The undergrowth was thick, the path barely visible. By 10 a.m., he'd wandered off course, not by accident, but by something else. A pull, an instinct. That's when he saw it. A glint of metal peeking through the soil near a fallen pine tree. Not shiny, but rusted, aged wrong. He knelt down, brushed the dirt away with gloved hands, and pulled out a knife. A hunting blade, the kind with a bone handle. At first, he thought little of it. Old campers lose things all the time. But then he turned it over. Carved crudely into the handle were 3 words. Ethan M., July 14th, 2026. Mason stared at the date. 2026? That couldn't be. It was only 2023. Goosebumps spread across his skin. He snapped a photo of the knife and coordinates, packed it carefully into a plastic bag, and hiked back to cell range. By sunset, the Salmon Police Department had been alerted. Within 24 hours, the FBI was back in Granite Creek. July 15th, 2023, FBI Field Office. Agent Olivia Jensen stared at the knife on the evidence table. She'd reviewed dozens of cold cases in her career, but this one stood apart. The fact that Ethan's initials were on the knife was one thing, but the date in the future? That was something else entirely. This could be a hoax, one tech suggested. Someone trying to get attention. But Agent Jensen wasn't so sure. She had read the 2003 reports, the zip tent, the lack of prints, the strange spiral. Something about it all had felt off. Now, 20 years later, a single knife had reawakened the mystery. She reopened the case file and issued a quiet directive. We searched the area where the knife was found, and this time we dig. And so, 2 decades after the world had stopped looking, the earth beneath Granite Creek was about to give up its secrets. July 18th, 2023, Granite Creek dig site. Under the dense canopy of pine trees, a blue tarp stretched across freshly disturbed earth. FBI agents, archaeologists, and forensic teams moved in silence, their gloves dusted with soil, their faces tight with expectation and dread. The search began precisely 30 feet from where Mason Fry had found the knife. Ground-penetrating radar revealed irregularities beneath the forest floor, voids that shouldn't exist naturally. By noon, the team had found what Agent Olivia Jensen feared, but also hoped for. A buried canvas backpack, rotted but intact. Inside it, a child's sketchbook, pages stuck together with mold. A wooden whistle with the initials LC. And a crumpled, faded camp schedule dated July 2003. Agent Jensen stepped away, her breath unsteady. "Don't stop," she ordered. "Dig deeper." They did. By sunset, they reached something harder than soil. It was wood, the outline of what looked like a hand-built chamber, reinforced with tree limbs and pine resin. Someone had buried it deliberately. And then came the stench, faint but unmistakable. Silence fell as a forensic technician uncovered a single sneaker, followed by a small wristwatch. And then, a human bone. Excavation halted. Tents were set up, lights installed. And by the next morning, it was official. Partial remains of 2 children had been discovered. The bones were found side by side, along with remnants of clothing consistent with what Lucas Carter and Noah Reyes had been wearing when they vanished. DNA testing would take time, but the evidence was already overwhelming. But Ethan's remains were not there. And yet, something more disturbing was. Carved into the inside wall of the wooden chamber was the same spiral symbol from the pine tree in 2003. Only this time, far more detailed and darker. Around it, strange letters, possibly not English, had been scratched in a circular pattern. Agent Jensen stood in silence, flashlight in hand, staring at the markings. "This wasn't just a place to bury something," she whispered. "This was ritualistic. Who had built this chamber? Why were only 2 boys buried here? And why did the markings look fresh, as if scratched just days ago, not decades?" The deeper they dug, the more the case began to slide from cold logic into chilling unknown. And the question that haunted everyone now was, where is Ethan Miller? July 21st, 2023. Evidence tent, Granite Creek. Inside the forensic tent, everything was cataloged meticulously. Every fragment of bone, every torn piece of fabric, every artifact uncovered from beneath the soil. But it was the discovery of a weathered leather-bound notebook, wrapped in waxcloth and buried beneath a slab of rock, that changed the entire direction of the investigation. Inside the journal were rough sketches, numbers, and pages smeared with charcoal drawings. It looked like the work of a child, but not from 20 years ago. The ink was too recent. The pages weren't yellowed with time. Most disturbingly, on the inside cover, in shaky but readable handwriting, were the words, "I'm still here. M. Agent Olivia Jensen turned pale. M. Ethan Miller." She flipped through the entries. One page showed a drawing of a boy inside a forest, surrounded by tall, shadow-like figures. Another showed the spiral symbol again, this time drawn with near obsession, over and over. The last entry reads simply, "Time doesn't work here. They come when it's dark. I tried to leave. I think I did. But I'm still here." The journal was sent for analysis. Handwriting experts were stunned. It matched Ethan's 2003 schoolwork samples. But the ink? It was no more than a year old. Confusion turned into speculation. Could Ethan have been alive until recently? Did someone keep him hidden? Is this journal a hoax or a cry for help? Then came something no one expected. July 24th, 2023, Mason Fry's cabin. Mason Fry, the photographer who had discovered the knife, returned to Boise but reported something chilling. He told investigators that on the night after finding the knife, he had been awake in his tent when he heard a boy's voice whispering outside, "Please don't let them bury me." He assumed he was dreaming. But now, with the journal found, the voice haunted him. He agreed to undergo a polygraph. He passed. FBI techs reviewed trail cam footage from nearby monitoring stations placed months earlier as part of forest fire control. One camera located less than a mile from the dig site had caught something. A blurry figure moving in the trees, small in stature, barefoot, and gone in seconds. They enhanced the footage. The image wasn't clear enough to identify, but the gait, the height, the clothing, all matched a 13-year-old boy. July 29th, 2023, uncharted sector, north of Granite Creek. Using updated drone scans and historical topographical data, FBI analysts identified a collapse-prone cave system just beyond the Granite Creek perimeter, a zone previously unsearched due to heavy rockfall back in 2003. With a full tactical team and forensic crew, Agent Olivia Jensen led the operation. After hours of navigating tight crevices and air-thin passages, the team entered a chambered cavern. The temperature dropped rapidly. The flashlight beams flickered over rough stone walls, revealing something unexpected. Symbols. Dozens of them. The same spiral motif, repeated endlessly. On one wall, carved with a sharpened stone. They wanted 3. I was the 3rd, but I escaped. On the floor near the far wall, agents uncovered a bedding of dried moss, tattered fabric, and scraps of food packaging, old enough to have degraded, but recent enough to suggest that someone had lived here. Near the bedding was a makeshift calendar, scratched into the stone. The markings stopped just weeks earlier. At the far end of the chamber, there was a second tunnel, caved in. They attempted excavation, but the rock was unstable. It was Agent Jensen who noticed the final clue, wedged between 2 rocks. A bracelet, engraved faintly with the initials EM. August 2nd, 2023, FBI press briefing. The press gathered in silence as Agent Jensen stepped up to the podium. We have found credible evidence suggesting that Ethan Miller survived well beyond the original date of disappearance, possibly up until recent months. While no body has been recovered, personal belongings, verified handwriting, and forensic evidence confirm his presence in the cave. We are now treating this not solely as a disappearance, but as a long-term captivity case with unknown variables. Reporters shouted, "Who kept him there? Was this a cult? What do the symbols mean?" Jensen didn't have answers, only more questions. August 5th, 2023, Karen Miller's home. Ethan's mother sat on her porch, staring at the pine trees beyond her yard. She held the bracelet in one hand, the journal in the other. She whispered, "He was here. All these years, my boy was alive." 3 weeks later, a forest ranger stationed near the Bitterroot Range reported seeing a teenage boy walking along the ridge at sunrise, barefoot, dirty, and silent. When he called out to them, the boy looked back once, then vanished into the trees. August 30th, 2023, Granite Creek Memorial Site. A simple wooden memorial now stands at the edge of Granite Creek. 3 carved names: Lucas Carter, Noah Reyes, Ethan Miller, status unknown. Friends, families, former campers, and FBI agents attended a private ceremony. It wasn't closure, but it was something. Karen Miller spoke briefly, holding Ethan's childhood drawing close to her chest. "For 20 years, I thought my son was gone, and maybe he was, but somewhere, somehow, a part of him survived. And I will wait for the day I see him again, in this world or the next." Jake Carter, now 34, placed his brother's wooden whistle at the base of the memorial. His eyes never left the tree line. "They weren't forgotten," he said, "and now neither is the truth." Theories spread like wildfire. YouTubers, Reddit sleuths, and armchair detectives dug deep. Some claimed a hidden forest cult operated in the early 2000s, using children for ritualistic sacrifices. Others believed the boys stumbled into a military testing zone and were silenced. A few pointed to ancient indigenous markings, saying the spiral was a symbol of dimensional entrapment. The more skeptical said Ethan survived alone, his mind broken, and he carved those symbols to cope with isolation. But the FBI had no suspects, no arrests, no clear explanation, only echoes. October 1st, 2023, a letter arrives. Karen Miller opened her mailbox. Amid bills and ads, one envelope stood out, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, scrawled in charcoal. "I see the sky again. I'm learning how to be real. Thank you for not forgetting me." There were pine needles inside the envelope. Forensic teams analyzed the handwriting. It was Ethan's. The charcoal matched the journal, but there were no fingerprints, no DNA, no traceable origin. The letter had been dropped in a rural postbox 3 towns over. Present day, Granite Creek remains closed. The forest has reclaimed the trail. The campsite is silent, but visitors still leave things behind. Sketches, bracelets, whispered prayers, and sometimes, late at night, someone swears they've heard a voice in the woods. Not screaming, not crying, just a whisper. "I'm still here." If this story left you speechless, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe for more true, haunting mysteries like this one.